The red dwarf star of Kepler 442 cast its crimson light across the mining colony, as death rained from the sky. Massive warships hung in orbit like metal vultures, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that had already reduced half the settlement to smoking craters. The hegemony had come to collect what they believed was theirs. Commander Zilkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bone Crusher, watching the carnage through the viewport. His scaled hide gleamed under the ship's harsh lights, and his forearms worked the control panels with practiced precision. The Kalar were born for war, their reptilian ancestors having conquered dozens of worlds before joining the galactic community. To them, this was just business. "Status report," he growled, his voice like grinding stone. "Mining facilities at 60% destruction, Commander," reported his tactical officer, a younger Kala whose scales still bore the bright patterns of youth. "The colonists have retreated to their underground bunkers. Their shields are failing." Below on the planet's surface, the story was far different. Dr. Vexani pressed herself against the cold metal wall of Emergency Bunker 7 as another explosion sent tremors through the ground. Around her, families huddled together in the dim, emergency lighting. Altari children with their delicate crystalline features wept silently, while Vexian parents used their natural empathic abilities to calm the terror spreading through the cramped space. The colony had been a model of galactic cooperation. Altari engineers had designed the mining equipment with their precision technology. Vexian negotiators had secured peaceful trade agreements with local governments. Dozens of other species had contributed their unique skills to make this remote world profitable and safe. Now it was all falling apart. "Mama, why are the bad ships hurting us?" asked little Velara, her young Altari features flickering between blue and purple with fear. Vexani pulled her daughter closer, feeling the child's rapid heartbeat against her chest. "I don't know, sweetheart, but someone will help us. Someone always comes to help." She wished she believed her own words. In the colony's communications center, 3 levels down, Chief Engineer Dalaron worked frantically at the emergency transmitter. The Vexian's natural telepathic abilities let him interface directly with the colony's computer systems, but even his enhanced skills couldn't break through the hegemony's jamming. "Can you reach the Galactic Council?" asked Dr. Vexani through the intercom. "Negative," Dalaron replied, his mental voice tight with strain. "They're blocking all standard frequencies. The Council fleet is weeks away, even if we could reach them." He paused, his large eyes reflecting the screen's glow. "But I'm detecting an opening in their jamming pattern. If I route power from life support, I might be able to punch a signal through to deep space." "Do it." The lights dimmed as Dalron redirected every available watt into the transmitter array. Unknown to him, his desperate signal would travel farther than any galactic transmission in recorded history, piercing through layers of cosmic interference to reach a region of space that most civilized species avoided. On the Bone Crusher, Communications Officer Haktel suddenly straightened at his station. "Sir, we're detecting a broad-spectrum distress signal." Commander Zilkar barely looked up from his tactical display. "Let them scream. The Galactic Council is weeks away. This will be over long before any help arrives." He gestured to his weapons officer. "Increase bombardment intensity. I want this finished by tomorrow." "Commander!" Haktel's voice cracked with panic. "The signal. It's not going to the Council. They're broadcasting into uncharted space, toward the Outer Rim territories." Now Zilkar paid attention. He moved to the communications station with predatory grace, his massive form towering over the smaller officer. "Show me." The display showed their target's transmission vector. A tight beam pointed toward a region of space, marked only with warning symbols on their star charts. "Primitive species, avoid contact," read the galactic notation, along with coordinates that most spacers knew to steer clear of. "Those sectors are forbidden for good reason," Zilkar mused. "Nothing but death and radiation out there. Whoever they're calling to is already dead." He turned away dismissively. "Continue the bombardment." But deep in space, something was listening. The signal passed gas giants and asteroid belts, crossed the boundaries of solar systems, and finally reached a small blue world orbiting a yellow star. Their primitive radio telescopes detected the alien transmission, and within hours, The message had been decoded by minds that refused to ignore a cry for help. 3 days after Dr. Vexani's desperate transmission, long-range sensors across the Kepler system detected energy signatures unlike anything in galactic databases. The readings made no sense. Primitive fusion drives mixed with technology that seemed to bend space itself. Ships appeared at the system's edge, dozens of them, their hulls scarred and mismatched as if cobbled together from spare parts and determination. Commander Zilkar stared at the sensor readings in disbelief. What are those things? His tactical officer's claws clicked nervously on his console. Unknown design, Commander. They're not in any of our databases. Should we hail them? The newcomers broadcast a simple message across all frequencies, transmitted in broken galactic standard, as if translated by primitive computers. We received your distress call. Help is here. Zilkar's blood ran cold. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a species foolish enough to respond to random distress signals from strangers. The very concept violated every principle of galactic survival. On the planet below, Dr. Vexani heard the transmission through the bunker's failing communication system and felt something she hadn't experienced in days. Hope, the silence of deep space shattered as 43 human vessels tore through the fabric of reality itself. Captain Jin gripped his command chair as the Defiance lurched out of hyperspace, his stomach doing flips from the rough transition. Human jump technology was crude compared to galactic standards, but it got the job done. It always got the job. "Turn sensors online, Captain," called out Lieutenant Min from his tactical station. The young officer's hands moved across holographic displays that flickered and sparked occasionally. Everything on human ships was built tough rather than elegant. Reading massive energy signatures throughout the system, Jin studied the tactical display showing red dots scattered across local space. Each dot represented a ship easily twice the size of his largest vessel. The human fleet looked pathetic in comparison. Converted cargo haulers with armor plates welded over civilian hulls, mining ships fitted with missile launchers, and patrol boats that had no business being this far from Earth. What do we have? Min, hostile fleet in high orbit around the fourth planet. Approximately 60 vessels, unknown configuration. They're conducting orbital bombardment of surface targets. Min's voice tightened. Captain, they're hitting civilian settlements. No military targets visible. From her engineering station, Chief One looked up from her constantly beeping displays. Her weathered face showed the kind of anger that came from a lifetime of fixing things other people broke. Aliens picking on civilians, she muttered, spitting tobacco juice into a worn metal cup. Some things never change, no matter how far you travel. Jin felt his jaw clench. He'd spent 20 years in Earth's Navy, from the resource wars to the Aji colonial uprisings. He'd seen enough bullies to last several lifetimes. Any response to our hails? Negative, sir. They're ignoring all communication attempts. Captain Yoon's voice crackled over the fleet communication channel from her vessel, the Soul's Pride. Jin, my sensors show energy weapons hitting populated areas. These aren't precision strikes. They're trying to wipe out everything down there. Copy that, Yoon. Jin opened a channel to address his entire fleet. In the corner of his screen, he could see the faces of his fellow captains, men and women who had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might never see home again. Captain Tay commanded the converted freighter, Busan Fury, her cargo holds now packed with missiles instead of trade goods. Captain Ho led a squadron of patrol boats, their crews barely out of training but burning with determination. All ships, this is defiance, Jin began, his voice carrying across 43 bridges. We came here because someone asked for help. That's all we need to know. He paused, looking at the burning planet displayed on his screen. Load all tubes. Today we teach these bastards why you don't hurt kids. The response was immediate. Across the human fleet, weapon systems came online with a symphony of mechanical sounds. Missile tubes opened with metallic clangs. Railgun capacitors whined as they charged. Point defense systems tracked and locked onto empty space. Their operators, ready for anything. Engineer 1 looked up from her console with grim satisfaction. Reactor output at 110%, Captain. She's running hot, but she'll hold together. Just like everything else we build, Jin replied with a tight, Smile. On the hegemony flagship, Bone Crusher, Commander Zilkar studied the approaching human fleet with growing amusement. His reptilian features twisted into what passed for a smile among his species. The primitive vessels looked like scrap metal held together with hope and stubbornness. Tactical analysis, he ordered. His weapons officer, a veteran Kalar warrior named Vashitar, examined the sensor readings with professional interest. Inferior technology, Commander. Primitive fusion drives, crude armor plating. Their largest vessel is barely a quarter the size of our smallest destroyer. How many? 43 confirmed contacts, mixed configuration, appears to be hastily converted civilian vessels. Zilkar laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. Signal the unknowns, tell them to leave immediately or be destroyed. Make it clear they have one chance to retreat with their lives. The communication was broadcast on all standard galactic frequencies, translated into the primitive languages the computers had detected from the newcomers. Unknown vessels, you are interfering with a lawful hegemony operation. Withdraw immediately or face annihilation. The response came back almost instantly, broadcast on every channel simultaneously. The voice was calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its certainty. We received your distress call. Help is here. Zilkar's amusement faded. What? Did they say? They claim to have received a distress call, Commander. They appear to be responding to the colonists' transmission. Impossible. No civilized species responds to random distress signals from strangers. Zilkar's claws clicked against his command console. Signal them again. Make our position clear. This time the human response was different. Captain Jin's voice carried, across space with the kind of authority that came from absolute conviction. Hegemony vessels, cease your bombardment immediately and withdraw from this system. You have 30 seconds to comply. The bridge of the Bone Crusher fell silent. Even the most battle-hardened Kalar warriors exchanged glances of disbelief. A fleet of 43 primitive vessels was making demands of 60 advanced warships. Sir, whispered Communications Officer Haktel, they can't be serious. Zilkar stared at the tactical display. The human ships were advancing in a loose formation that made no tactical sense by galactic standards. They weren't trying to maximize their firepower or protect their larger vessels. Instead, they moved forward like a pack of predators, each ship ready to act independently. Deploy the fleet, Zilkar ordered. Show these primitives the price of interfering with the hegemony. As his ships moved to intercept the humans, Zilkar couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to learn something terrible about this unknown species, something that would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life. The first shot of the battle came from the hegemony fleet. A massive plasma lance erupted from the Bone Crusher, designed to vaporize the lead human vessel in a single blast. Instead, the beam struck empty space as Captain Tay's ship, the Soul Hammer, had already moved. Not with evasive maneuvers or fancy flying, but with the kind of wild acceleration that should have turned every human aboard into paste. Impossible, breathed Tactical Officer Vashitar on the hegemony flagship. Their inertial compensators can't handle that kind of acceleration. Commander Zilkar studied the tactical display as 43 human ships scattered across space, in patterns that violated every principle of fleet combat. They have no formation discipline, no coordination. This will be a massacre. He was right. About the massacre part, Captain Tay's voice echoed across human communication channels as the Soul Hammer dove straight toward the center of the alien formation. Remember what we're here for, people. Those are kids down there counting on us. Her ship's engines glowed white-hot as she pushed them beyond their safety limits. Engineer Park, give me everything she's got. Captain, the reactor's already at 120%. Park's voice was strained as alarms blared across his engineering deck. Any more, and we'll have a containment breach. Then give me a containment breach. The hegemony ships moved to intercept, their weapon systems tracking the incoming human vessel with mechanical precision. Energy beams and particle cannons opened fire, but Tay had already predicted their targeting patterns. The Soul Hammer rolled and twisted through space like a fighter craft, not a heavy cruiser. How are they pulling those maneuvers? Demanded Zilkar. His sensor operator, a nervous young Kalar named Tekron, stammered as he read his displays. "Sir, their ship is taking structural damage from their own maneuvers. Metal fatigue indicators are off the charts. They're literally tearing their vessel apart with those turns, and they keep flying anyway." Before Tekron could answer, the Soul Hammer reached the hegemony formation, but instead of opening fire or trying to break through, Tay did something that froze every alien warrior to their core. She aimed her ship directly at the nearest cruiser and kept accelerating. "Eject! All hands, eject now!" Tay shouted into her comm as the distance closed to mere kilometers. Around her, crew members sealed their emergency suits and prepared for the unthinkable. "Captain, this is insane." Chief Engineer Park grabbed his console as the ship shook apart around them. "We can take them in a fair fight." Tay's laugh echoed. Through the comm channel, wild and fierce, "Since when do bullies deserve a fair fight?" She reached for the manual reactor override, the one with warnings in 6 different languages. "See you on the other side, Park." The Soul Hammer ejected its entire crew in escape pods just seconds before Tay triggered a controlled reactor. Overload. The ship became a small star for 3 brilliant seconds, and when the light faded, 3 hegemony cruisers had simply ceased to exist. Across the battlefield, Captain Ho watched the sacrifice from his patrol boat, Incheon's Fury. "All units, the Soul Hammer just opened the door. Pour through it." The smaller human vessels swarmed through the gap Tay had created, but they didn't fight like any military force the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of coordinated volleys or tactical formations, each ship seemed to operate on pure aggression and improvisation. Captain Yun's converted freighter, the Guangzhou's Revenge, had been a cargo hauler 3 months ago. Now it bristled with missile pods and carried the kind of armor that belonged on a battleship. When hegemony fighters moved to intercept her, she did something no freight captain should ever do. She rammed them. "Brace for impact," Yun shouted, as her ship's reinforced bow smashed through a formation of alien fighters like they were made of paper. Her ship's hull groaned and buckled, but it held together through sheer human stubbornness. On the Bone Crusher, Commander Zilkar watched, his tactical display with growing horror. "Report. What's happening to Fighter Squadron 7? "They've been destroyed, sir. The cargo vessel rammed them at full speed." "A cargo ship defeated an entire fighter squadron?" "Yes, sir. And it's still operational. But the moment that truly broke the hegemony's will came when the wreckage of the Soul Hammer started shooting back. Emergency pods that should have contained helpless survivors instead disgorged human marines in full combat gear. Sergeant Bow led the first boarding party, her magnetic boots clanking against the hull of a hegemony destroyer as her squad prepared to cut their way inside. "Control, this is boarding team Alpha," Bow reported into her suitcom. "We're on the hull of target designation Ugly 7, preparing for breach." "Sergeant, you're in hard vacuum with no support," came the reply from Captain Jin on the Defiance. "Fall back to pickup." Bow looked around at her squad, 12 Marines floating in space with nothing but their suits and whatever weapons they'd grabbed before abandoning ship. Corporal Na had somehow managed to arm himself with a piece of hull plating and was using it to deflect incoming fighter fire. "Negative, Control. We've got work to do." Bow activated her plasma torch and began cutting through alien armor plating. Besides, someone's got to teach these things some manners. The sight of humans cutting into their ships while floating in open space sent waves of panic through the hegemony fleet. These weren't soldiers following orders or pirates seeking profit. These were beings who would literally die before letting harm come to innocence. Within 17 minutes of first contact, the mighty hegemony fleet was in full retreat. Survivors broadcast frantic warnings across galactic communication networks about the death-seeking demons that had emerged from forbidden space. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds fled in terror from a ragtag fleet of converted civilian vessels. As the last alien ship jumped to hyperspace, Captain Jin surveyed the battlefield. Half his fleet was damaged or destroyed, but they'd won. More importantly, the bombardment of the planet below had stopped. "All ships, prepare for rescue." "Operations," Jin ordered. "Let's go save some lives." The first human shuttle touched down in a cloud of dust and debris just outside Emergency Bunker 7. Dr. Vexani pressed her face against the small viewport, watching strange beings in bulky white suits pour out of the craft. These humans moved differently than any species she'd encountered, not with the careful precision of Altari engineers or the flowing grace of Vexian diplomats, but with raw urgency that seemed to burn in their every step. "Medical team, move out," called Sergeant Lee as she coordinated the rescue efforts. Her combat armor was scorched from the space battle, but she carried medical supplies instead of weapons. "We've got wounded civilians who've been trapped for 3 days. The bunker doors hadn't opened properly since the bombardment began." Chief Engineer Park examined the twisted metal with practiced eyes, then pulled out tools that looked more like weapons than repair equipment. "Stand back," he called to the frightened colonists inside. "This might get loud." The plasma cutter roared to life, slicing through reinforced steel like it was paper. Within minutes, Park had carved a hole large enough for people to pass through. As the metal cooled, he helped the first colonist through, a small Altari child whose crystalline features flickered with fear. "It's okay, little one," Park said gently, his translator working overtime to convert his words into something the child could understand. "You're safe now." Dr. Vexani emerged next, clutching her injured daughter Velara close to her chest. The child's breathing was labored, her natural color shifting between purple and gray, a sign of serious internal trauma in young Altari. By galactic medical standards, the injuries were beyond field treatment. That's when she saw something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Medic Yoon approached with her medical kit, but instead of the sleek, automated diagnostic tools common throughout the galaxy, she carried equipment that looked crude and bulky. Her scanner was a handheld device with actual buttons and switches. Her medical supplies came in metal containers marked with symbols that seemed almost primitive. "Let me see her," Yoon said, her voice carrying the kind of calm authority that came from years of emergency medicine. She began examining Velara with instruments that required actual skill to operate, not just computer assistance. "The damage is too extensive," Dr. Vexani whispered. "Her respiratory system is failing. The nearest proper medical facility is days away and she won't survive the journey." Yoon looked up from her scanner, dark eyes fierce with determination. "We didn't come this far to lose anyone now." She turned to her medical team. "I need a portable surgical unit set up immediately, and get me Specialist Kim. We're going to need his expertise with alien physiology." "Why?" Dr. Vexani asked through her translator as Yoon began stabilizing her daughter's condition with what appeared to be primitive medical techniques. "Why are you doing this? We are nothing to you. Complete strangers from across the galaxy." Yoon paused in her work, looking directly into the alien doctor's eyes. "You called for help, that's enough." Across the colony, similar scenes played out as human rescue teams spread through the damaged settlement. Engineer Mi had never seen alien technology before yesterday, but she was already jury-rigging human medical equipment to work with Vexian neural interfaces. Her approach was simple. If the alien equipment needed specific power frequencies, she'd build a converter. If their life support systems operated on different atmospheric mixtures, she'd modify the human units to match. "This is impossible," muttered Dr. Feltan, the colony's chief medical officer, as he watched me rewire a human medical scanner to work with Altari physiology. "Those modifications should take weeks of careful programming." Mi looked up from her work, her hands covered in grease and her uniform singed from electrical sparks. "Maybe if you're trying to be perfect," she said with a grin, "but sometimes good enough right now beats perfect later." In the colony's main shelter, Supply Sergeant A faced a different challenge. She'd brought enough human rations to feed her own rescue teams, but now faced 300 hungry alien colonists with completely different dietary requirements. Some species couldn't process human proteins. Others needed trace minerals that Earth food lacked entirely. "Sergeant," called Private Cho, "the Vexian children can't digest our emergency rations. Their biochemistry is too different." AE studied the nutritional data on her tablet, then looked at the hungry alien children watching her with large, hopeful eyes. "Then we'll make it work." She turned to her supply team. "Break out the medical synthesizers. We are going to create custom nutrition solutions for every species here." "Sarge, that's not what those machines are for," Cho protested. "Today they are. For 6 hours, AE and her team worked to convert medical equipment into food processors, creating nutritionally balanced meals for species they'd never heard of before yesterday. When the alien children finally ate their first proper meal in days, their grateful expressions needed no translation. Perhaps the most shocking moment came when the rescue teams found Yextor, a Vexian maintenance worker trapped under a collapsed beam in Sublevel 3. The heavy metal had crushed his spine, and his natural telepathic abilities were failing, always a fatal sign in his species. By galactic medical standards, Yextor was already dead. The humane thing would be to make him comfortable and let nature take its course. But when Private Han found him, the young soldier refused to accept that diagnosis. "We need a full extraction team down here," Han called into his comm. "Heavy equipment, surgical support, everything we've got." "Negative," came the reply from Captain Jin. "Medical says he's beyond help. Don't risk more lives for someone who's already gone." Han looked down at Yextor, whose eyes still held awareness despite his failing body. "With respect, Captain, he's not dead yet, and as long as he's alive, we don't give up." For 14 hours, a full human rescue team worked to extract Yextor from the debris. They brought in plasma cutters to slice through the beam without causing further injury. They set up a portable surgical suite in the cramped underground space. Most incredibly, they refused to consider the operation hopeless, even when Yextor flatlined twice during the extraction. "It's not logical," Dr. Vexani would later report to the Galactic Council. "They expended massive resources to save a single being who had no chance of survival." When I asked their commander why, he said, "Because he asked for help, and that's what help means." 3 days later, Yextor walked out of the human medical facility under his own power. Human medicine, it turned out, had very different ideas about what constituted terminal. The emergency session buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 47 different species filled the massive council chamber. Floating jellyfish-like beings drifted near the ceiling, while rock-skinned giants stood at the back. Multi-armed creatures with glowing eyes sat alongside beings made of pure, crystalline energy. Never before had such an urgent gathering been. Called Chief Analyst Kurthak approached the central podium, his purple tentacles trembling as he activated the holographic display. The footage began to play, showing scenes that had shaken the galaxy to its core. "Watch this carefully," Kurthak announced, his voice echoing through translation devices. When the human fleet received the distress call from the mining station, they had no idea what species sent it. They didn't even know if the beings were friendly or hostile. The hologram showed sleek human spacecraft racing through the void, their engines blazing blue-white against the darkness. Inside the lead ship, humans worked frantically at control panels, calculating jump coordinates and preparing medical supplies. "Look at their faces," Kurthak pointed out. "See the determination? They're not thinking about rewards or treaties, they're thinking about saving lives." Representative Morden, a massive bear-like creature with metallic fur, growled from his seat. "This makes no sense. Evolution doesn't work this way. Species become dominant by being selfish, by protecting their own first." The footage shifted to show the human rescue teams boarding the damaged mining station. Smoke filled the corridors as sparks flew from damaged systems. The station's insectoid inhabitants, with their compound eyes and chitinous shells, cowered in damaged sections, expecting the worst from these unknown aliens. But instead of conquest, they witnessed something unprecedented. A human medic knelt beside a wounded insectoid miner, her hands gentle as she applied bandages to injuries she'd never seen before. She worked with steady focus, speaking in soft tones even though the alien couldn't understand her words. The meaning was clear in her actions. "They shared their own food supplies," Kurthak continued, switching to footage of humans distributing emergency rations. Even though they had no idea how long their own mission would take, they gave away half their medical supplies to beings they'd met minutes earlier. The council watched in stunned silence as the scenes unfolded. Human engineers worked alongside the station's robotic repair units, their tools sparking as they rewired alien technology they'd never seen before. When a section of the station began collapsing, human soldiers didn't hesitate to run toward the danger, carrying trapped miners to safety. One particularly striking scene showed a human pilot, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead, carrying an unconscious Altari child through a smoke-filled corridor. The child's blue skin glowed faintly in the emergency lighting as the human struggled against the artificial gravity, refusing to leave the young one behind. They call this behavior humanity, Kurthak explained, pausing on the image. It's their word for showing compassion to any living being, regardless of species or circumstance. The Vexian representative, a being of shifting light patterns, flickered anxiously. But surely they expect something in return. Territory, resources, trade agreements. Kurthak manipulated the display to show the aftermath. Human ships were already preparing to leave, their rescue complete. The mining station's inhabitants offered valuable minerals, rare crystals, even territorial concessions. The human commander simply shook her head and wished them well. They asked for nothing, Kurthak confirmed. When pressed, their commander said, and I quote, "Someone needed help. That's enough." The chamber erupted in confused chatter. Beings whispered in dozens of languages, their translation devices creating a cacophony of bewildered voices. The concept seemed impossible to grasp. Council President Zarnen, her serpentine form coiled on the central platform, raised her crested head for silence. Her golden scales shimmered as she spoke. What are the long-term implications of this behavior? Kurthak's analysis appeared on screens throughout the chamber. If their response patterns hold true, humans will answer any genuine distress call within their range. They don't seem to calculate odds of survival or potential gains. They simply respond. A chill settled over the diverse assembly. The galaxy had known wars, conquests, and alliances based on mutual benefit, but this was something entirely new and, in its own way, terrifying. They crossed unknown space, whispered the crystalline delegate, her voice like wind chimes. They risked their lives for strangers. What kind of species does that? Representative Morden's metallic fur bristled, the kind that might decide we're the problem someday. What happens when they receive a distress call claiming we're the threat? The silence that followed was deafening. Every species in the chamber had enemies, had engaged in conflicts, had reasons to fear judgment from beings with such absolute moral conviction. President Zarnen studied the frozen image of the human medic tending to the alien child. "Motion to revise all emergency broadcast protocols," she announced formally. "New warning to be included. Signal may reach human space. Ensure genuine emergency status. Humans respond to all distress calls regardless of species involved." The motion passed unanimously. As representatives filed out of the chamber, many cast nervous glances at the footage still playing on the screens. The galaxy had discovered something more unsettling than any weapon or warrior fleet. Somewhere out, there was a species that crossed the void itself simply because someone had asked for help.